Welcome, everyone. This is Coaching in Session. My name is Michael Rearden, and I will be your mindset coach today. And today we're going to be talking about schooling and education. If you are a longtime listener, you probably know I have been an educator for a good portion of my life at this point, where we can look at the idea of what is education coming from a person who has been in it, in the public schools and private schools and magnet schools. I can see the different nuances of everything. I can even see the aspect of homeschooling, the pros and the cons, and what you need to do to make sure that things that can happen that are bad don't happen. I know quite a bit. I'm not going to say I know it all because, again, there's always the aspect of learning, of education, of knowledge. As things change and things adjust, we have to be flexible. But there is a difference between education and schooling. Education is going to be that we are learning with the times. Think of it as your grandfather, grandmother. They might not know how to use an iPad, but your kid can probably navigate an iPad better than the Apple techs at the Apple store. Why? How is this so? It's because they understand that their level of technology savvy needs to be higher because they are already immersed in it from a young age. They're sponges. Yet, I'm not saying that they're dinosaurs, but they have that mentality of ancient. I used to not have this, and now I have this. And in order for me to implement it, I have to learn it. And then, of course, there's going to be that clause in your mind is like, do I really need to learn this? Do I want to go do the effort and maybe even the hardship to learn something? Because there can be a bit of frustration to learn something new, right? We might not want to do it. But schooling is the opposite of that. It's going to be a regimented curriculum that you have to follow. Everyone goes through it if you go through the school system. We're going to be talking about my most recent blog that's going to be talking about the difference between schooling and education, what we need to be looking out for, and how to stay on track if we choose one or the other. All right, everyone, if you're new to the channel, new to the podcast, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and to share the video and our audio to help build a community of like-minded individuals. Today, we're going to be going into the realm of education and schooling. This is an article that was long overdue. I needed to get this done, and I have articles very similar to this, but nothing that's going to be as pronounced as saying schooling and education are different. Because sometimes you would think if you go to school to get an education. However, today, if you have been listening to some past episodes, indoctrinated beliefs, etc., you would find that schooling might not lead to education, but indoctrination. Is indoctrination truly the aspect of schooling? We can even argue on that. We can look at the concept of what education is and what indoctrination is very briefly, is that indoctrination is going to be pre-thought out thoughts. Education is going to be looking to investigate and understanding and come to a conclusion. Now, the conclusion is going to be our own conclusion. We are going to be young scientists in the regard of we are trying to make moves toward a better mind, a stronger knowledge base, and then having that all turn to wisdom later on. Because right now we are just kind of operating in what he or she said rather than what is truly going on. So Mark Twain had said, and I start off this blog with this concept because it is going to be the premise for our conversation today, is that do not allow your child's schooling to get in the way of their education. And that is so powerful because we can look at a student who goes to school and a student who is homeschooled. The level of, I guess you can say, the discrepancy in their understanding and knowledge. Not only that, but who they are as a person, their character. Now, there's many things that need to be in place in order for this to be true because, of course, there can be horror stories of, I don't want to send my kid to school, but then you refuse to educate them. If you are a parent who does not have the time to educate your child, you are better off putting them in the system and then allowing a coach, a mindset coach. This is what I do. I fix what the schools have done to the children later on in life. that would be your better option. If you have the resources currently right now, you would put them in the best school possible. It could be a private school, it could be a Montessori school, a Waldorf school. I mean, there's many different options for schooling. You could even get a private tutor and go the homeschooling route if you have the resources. Not everyone has the resources, right? So schooling is one of those things that just happen systematically. Because if I'm supposed to send my kid to school, and you're supposed to legally, you're required to send your kid to school or to get an education, this is not to say that we have the choice to allow our kids to be dumb or that we can't homeschool our kids, but we do have to be able to provide resources and proof that this is happening. And they do have to take, I believe, tests, like the GED later on, the high school equivalent. If we compare what school does versus a general homeschooling education does, is homeschooling is going to teach you the real world a lot sooner versus schooling is going to be a lot of fictitious things, make-believe things, concepts that might be beneficial, but it is approached in a roundabout way. So this means basically that if I want my kids to be educated and I send them to school, it's going to take them, 8 years longer than it would someone who is homeschooled? So that means by the age of 10, and even though you're not developmentally sound and you are going through those puberty years and stuff like that, you would be able to have the level of information that you could have when you are in high school or just getting ready to end high school. And then if you focus on the 10 to 15 mark, you can get ready for college. And then from there, when you're 20, you could be a doctor. But yet, by the time we're 20, we might be a sophomore in college. That is going to be generous. So we spend the first 25 years of our life learning, being educated, being told what to do and what to believe. And you know what happens after? We find ourselves struggling in our 30s. Why? Because we're not prepared for the real world. We are not educated. We were schooled, but we were not educated. We were told how to act in school. We were told how to stand in line. We were told to sit down and raise our hand if we had to use the bathroom or if we wanted to speak. We were told to go to this class and to give this type of response and to regurgitate information on the test. We have been schooled in a sense. I'm probably dating myself here, but there is a term used back. It was like, you got schooled, meaning like you got taught, you got learned a lesson. In a sense, the lessons that we learn are the negative ones, limiting beliefs, self-doubt, fear, and anxiety, all prevalent in schools. We can just see them as jail cells. If we look at how schools are reminiscent of jail cells. You're in a concrete building. Some have, some rooms have windows or very small windows, and you have to, follow a schedule. Not saying that it's a bad thing to be regimented, but there is a difference between schooling and education. And today we're going to be talking about all the nuances of that. I am going to leave this article up here for you to read. It is going to be a different mindset, a different perspective on what we're going to be talking about today. I do want to get into all the reality of what schooling and education is and what you can do about it. So when we start to look at what can we do about what's going on in the world, because you might be a parent, I'm a parent. I can say, you know what? I don't want to send my kids to school. And my wife already knows we're not going to send them to any public school, even though we have, I believe, the #1 school district in the whole entire country, Round Rock, Texas, over here. And then the second, I believe, is in Leander, Texas. And you might ask, well, how do they rate these scores, right? Well, they do a couple things. The first thing is they look at the facilities, right? Are the facilities updated? Are they getting everything they need, right? Paper, pens, whiteboards, technology, right? Are they getting that? Then we can look at the aspect of amenities. Do they have new fields? High schools have new buildings, sports teams, new equipment, all of this, right? We look at all of this. And then they even go as far to look at the teachers and their rankings. So teachers of the year, like how many teachers get voted teachers of the year here in Round Rock, Texas versus in Austin or versus in New York, et cetera, et cetera. I'm not saying that there's not teachers that are not wonderful in every state. This is not to say that teachers are being pinpointed saying you're bad, you need to do better, you need to figure out how to be just like them. This is not that conversation. The conversation is that teachers have their hands cuffed. They are severely outnumbered. They don't have the, I guess you can say, the support to do their job effectively and efficiently. So they barely make it through. Most teachers, they just give themselves the mindset of, if I can make it through today, I'll be okay. So they will not give their all because at some point they lose hope. Think of like breaking the spirit of something or someone. It could happen as a teacher. And there might be days when you're stressed, you got your own problems and everything. And now you have, Johnny just, yelling and screaming. And you're like, today's not the day. You're just there. You're just literally thinking like, what are you going to do to make it through? And this is not even to say that you're a bad teacher. This is just to say that maybe the mix of students that you got can be a bit difficult to deal with. I have worked with teachers who have had some of the roughest bunch in their classes. And sometimes you could have a mix for, amazing learning and education. And sometimes you can have a mix of, okay, let's make it through the day. And those mixes of let's make it through the day have a deteriorating effect on all the children in the room. Not saying that there's no learning happening, but there's more schooling happening in those classrooms than there is education. Because education is almost like an open palm. Like I have my hand open. I'm trying to give you some knowledge. I'm saying, here, take it. But if you're over here running around in a circle, throwing crayons at people, I need to fix that. So schooling might be, I got to put out fires. I got to, teach you how to operate. I got to make sure you know not to stand up, not to throw things. And if you think about it, how is that education? That's an indoctrination to society saying, hey, you need to not throw stuff at people. Yes, it's a great thing to know, but as a parent, you should have already instilled that by the time they were, 2, maybe 3? Keep our hands and feet to ourselves and make sure they understand the golden rule. We have gone away from making sure that education is the prime factor that we should be looking at when we send our kids off. Yet there's so much happening that's a negative thing in schools. Do you know why children separate from their parents? It's because at some point they spend more time with their peers and their teachers away from the parent that they become disassociated with mom and dad. Now, many people, even scientists, will say, oh, they're just growing up. When the reality is you are taking away and you're severing the connection. Now, we don't want them to be needy, right? Like as a parent, you don't want them to be dependent on you. But then at the same time, you want them to be able to come to you when they need you. Yet most of these students in the world today, they would rather go to their peers before they go to a parent or a guardian figure because schooling has taken over. Education is no longer there. The parent has said, well, I'm no longer going to educate my child because I've already done it for, so many years. I read books to them. I do this. This is why, kids don't know finances because the schools are not teaching their finances and stuff like that in schools. So that means parents should do it. But if parents are not doing, who's teaching them finances? Parents give away the power to educate. They relinquish it to the schools. So they hope that the schools are going to do good, that they teach them how to read and write and to have the basics done. But then when real life kicks in, 18, 19, 20, they're not equipped to handle the world. Then we look at the people who do extremely well. I'm just going to use an example. If you know Grant Cardone, I've talked about him on the podcast. He's a decent guy enough, right? He has a daughter. I think he might have more than one daughter, but the daughter I'm talking about is he didn't want her to go to school. He says it's a big waste of time. For some people, they must say, oh my God, I can't believe you're not sending your daughter to school. It's a waste of time. What kind of parent are you? Yet this girl has done more things in her years than probably a 25-year-old that is, all done with college. Why? How? And I believe maybe she's 13 or something like that, around there. How was someone able to do 10, 12 years of knowledge and education versus someone else who has gone through the system of schooling? We have to look at what happens during school. Well, in the morning, you sit down, you wait for the teacher to be ready. You might have some busy work of coloring or doing your numbers or something like that. You have to put your coat away, put your lunches away, right? It takes about sometimes 15 to 30 minutes for that to happen. Then there's an intercom thing that happens. There's no more Pledge of Allegiance. So it's more of a national anthem. Some schools, I believe, still do it. I know the school that I was at, they did the Pledge of Allegiance. And then when I got moved, there was no Pledge of Allegiance there. So there's different schools with different values and different beliefs, of course. So depending on the school, right, you're going to have a different morning routine. Then you get into the work. The lesson plans are there. There's some schools that are regimented. For example, here in Texas, we have a school called Idea Charter Schools, and it's a college prep school. And they pride themselves on making sure that their kids go to college. And you have to ask yourself, how in the world are these charter schools, and there's quite a bit of idea schools, getting all of this money? And the reason is the government loves it. Oh, I can give this charter school some money and they can guarantee 100% of the students that go there are going to go to college. And those students are going to get student loans. And those student loans are going to stop that student from being financially fit and free to go off and to be prosperous and start their own businesses. We are going to indoctrinate them into the system. We are allowing them to be schooled. But there's something special, or maybe not special, about these idea charter schools is that these schools are 100% scripted. That means the teacher does not truly teach. They read. They read what the proposed curriculum is. And this cookie cutter approach is going to be for everyone. It doesn't matter if your kid's a genius. They're going to fall in line with everyone else. And I have talked about the aspect of like the genius tests and what happens to children that are in schools. They lose their genius, et cetera, et cetera. And I remember, when I was working at the nursing home in college, there was a man, he had his mom recovering at the nursing home. She had to go for surgery and then go to the nursing home to recover. He had a daughter. The daughter was 2 at the time, 2.5, about 3. The girl, she made a circle and she's like, oh, this is a tree. And I'm like, it looks more like a cookie. So I showed the guy, I said, watch this. And I drew a tree the right way. I was like, this is what happens in school. We tell them what to do, what things are. And I'm not saying that if I draw a tree and she draws a cookie or something, or she draws a dog and she says the dog's a tree. Of course, that's not a tree, right? We know that's true. But the fact that I'm able to mold a person to think in a certain way, that this is that. Now, let's not use something concrete as something as black and white, a color, blue, yellow, green, whatever, right? A tree, a car. Let's get away from that now. Let's talk about beliefs. What if I told you that a certain belief had to be instilled in you? You need to follow this belief. And if you don't follow this belief, then you're evil. If you don't follow this belief, then you're a bad person. I don't want to be a bad person. I'm only 4 or 5 years old. I'm 7 years old. I don't want to be a bad person. I want to be good. I want my mommy and my daddy to love me. Or do you want your mommy and daddy to love you? Then you need to be a good girl and you need to sit quiet. Have you ever heard a teacher say that? If you haven't been in schools long enough. Because they say that unknowingly. I need to sit quietly or my mommy and daddy won't love me. Schooling does that. That's not education. And the fact that you just throw them off to the races, throw them off into the school and say, well, good luck. Tell me what you learn later on. And then when you sit them down for dinner, if you even eat dinner as a family, what do you learn today? Oh, I don't know. Because schooling is a waste of time. The majority of their day, they're going through the rudiments of, what they need to do. Stand in line. Let's practice standing in line. Let's practice being quiet. What does this mean? You put your 2 fingers up or 1 finger up and you put your finger over your mouth. What does it mean? Oh, everyone be quiet. We're basically just trained parrots or something. We're just training parrots. This is not good. Schools are great if they can be effective, meaning allowing teachers to do their job. And I'm not throwing teachers under the bus. Teachers who go into teaching, I would say 85, maybe even 90% of teachers who go into schools have the best intentions to make a difference in these children's lives. They want to see these children succeed and do well and grow and be happy and learn. But yet, as a first-year teacher, you learn there's only so much you can do, and it's about grading and stuff like that. I got to give them a grade. Now the grade makes them feel a certain way. Oh, now they are not able to give themselves any effort. Or mom and dad are going to fight for an A, but they don't truly understand what an A truly means. An A means that you're just following in the system. You have fell into the trap. If your kid is getting an A, it doesn't mean that they're smart. It means that they're controlled. It's a hard pill to swallow. We can look at if we are on track on our education. That's what I did as a teacher. I said developmentally, you need to be here. And if you're not there, then this is your grade. This was not about if you can recite things. It is about if you can do the things that you need to do at this age. If you're 16 years old and you can't read, that's a problem. Yet those teachers who have these 16-year-olds that can't read, you know what they do? They pass them on to the next grade because they say, I don't want to deal with that problem. The sad reality of schooling is that many teachers are not going to invest in someone who doesn't even know how to invest in themselves. Education, on the other hand, is going to be instilling something into someone, an individual, that they can learn, that they can grow, and at the pace they do it is going to be according to them. If you have parents, it's going to, be another critical component. If we look at the statistics, children who don't have a parent involved in their education, like while they're in school, do drastically worse than those who have parents that are involved. The parents that are involved are not fighting their kids' battles. They're literally just there to make sure that they're on track. Of course, we can look at the system. We can look at, the aspect of schooling and say, schooling is not all bad. That's true. It's not all bad. But schooling is an outdated belief. Do you know who was the person who created or was one of the first investors of the Board of Education in 1903, I believe, or it was 1913. I forget the year. I think it was 1903. And then I think it was finalized in 1913 or something like that, was Rockefeller. That right there shows you. Rockefeller was the one who, proposed that we need to, normalize schools because we need more workers in our factories. This is a business proposition. Send off your kids to school so we can get workers. We teach them about the 9-to-5 mentality. We teach them about the American dream. We say, get a job, work a 9-to-5, and at 65, you get to retire. That's the American dream. That's what's taught in schools. Raise your hand when we need to speak to you. Only the true elite of the world are not going to be going through these schools that everyone else is going through, these public schools and stuff like that. They have private tutors and stuff like that. Why? Yes, they have the resources, but then at the same time, they understand that school's a trap. To get the mindset of being schooled is not conducive or indicative to a life that's going to be full of knowledge and wisdom. We need to get back to what schooling should be, and that is giving children the best education possible so that by the time they are faced and presented the real world, the true real world, they're ready. So in closing, schooling versus education is going to be talking about the aspect of if we understand that schooling is the problem and education is the answer, how can we give the answer to the problem so the problem can be resolved? Well, it's not as easy as it would seem. The schooling is going to be controlled by your state. There's only so much you can do. Of course, you can yell, you can scream, but it is going to be a waste. So that means you have to make sure that if you are in that situation where you will send your kids to school and they will be getting an education, or you would hope they get an education, is that you give them the best school possible. You give them the best opportunities possible. You sacrifice until whenever you have to sacrifice. It can be when they're 18 and they leave the house or whatever. But then even that's a new mindset that we have to look at too. Regardless, there is an approach to learning. There is an approach to how children develop. And most of the schools and most of the science and the way we do things in the curriculum goes away from how children truly learn. So if we're not teaching them how they should be learning, what are we doing? And the simple answer is we are not doing them justice. We are not educating them to the degree that they can be educated. We are dumbing them down, way down. We can look at, the past generations, and I mean, schooling is just getting progressively worse and more intrusive in people's lives. Technology has exacerbated that, but we have taken away the aspect of critical thinking, the aspect of, self-identity. And I'm not talking about the identity that people create for themselves. I'm saying true to their character and their values that their parents might not even have because they're lost. They don't even know what to do. It's like the blind leading the blind. We need to make some changes. And I encourage everyone, if you have a young child in your life, if you know someone who has a young child, make sure that they understand the aspect of education in its totality. That education is looking at all the cogs in the wheels and not becoming a cog in the wheel. We can see what's happening to someone else. We can look at the bigger picture. We can ask questions. We can demand to see progress being made versus just kind of doing things being stagnant. Because education has not changed in its time from 1950. Of course, we have different schools. We have ACs in schools. We have different technologies. We have different materials for them to learn. But the whole aspect of schooling has not really changed. And if we look at what's going to happen in the next decade, school is probably not going to change again. Schooling is always going to be this regimented thing to push out workers, to push out people who don't have critical thinking skills, who lack common sense, who don't know what is their true power and their true identity. They're just going to be following a standard and expectation that we talked about last week. This is something that is not an assumption either. This is something that is happening, and it is a reality. So if you want to change your reality, if you want to change the trajectory of how the education and the schooling system is going, you have to be, as a parent, you have to be involved in your child's education in their life. If you need to give your child a resource, you make sure you give them a good coach, a sports coach. That's typically good enough for when they're younger. And when they're older, if they're having a lot of issues, you can seek a counselor. I have seen them work, but then at some time you just need a coach. You need someone who's going to be there to listen to them, to help them navigate through what they have been, going on in their mind, and then uncovering their genius again, because at some point we throw it away. We say, you know what, this is something that we don't need. This is not helping us, because whenever we try to do something like, be outside the box or operate outside the box, either we're ridiculed or we're belittled. So we need to get back into the sense of, I'm not afraid to be outcasted. I'm not afraid to be different, because we would pick on the nerds in the school. And then later on in life, those nerds are going to be the people who have created softwares and big companies and now we work for them. But the reality is we have that power to grasp that education, to grasp that understanding. But there's many things that we have to avoid. And if we get hit by them, because that's just life, right? We're growing up and, we are introduced to them. There is a way to repair. There is a way to fix whatever has happened. But the process is more difficult. I always say it is easier to make sure a child is not broken than to heal a broken adult. And I have too many broken adults in my office. We need to change what is happening so that the schooling is not interfering with our children's education. So by the time they grow up, they are already self-sufficient and efficient and effective that they are already going after a life full of abundance and prosperity. The correlation is, are we allowing other people to influence the minds that were meant to be who they were, and then they have to figure out who they are later on? Or should we just allow them to learn in life and grow in life and then live accordingly to their path? There's no cookie cutter approach to life. That's why we don't have cookie cutter approaches here at Reven Concepts. Schooling is a cookie cutter approach. And if you have fallen into that trap 1 or 2 times or too many times to count, it doesn't mean that you can't make some adjustments today. So make the adjustment, look at knowledge, look at education, look at wisdom, and look at how you can level up your life, your kids' life, your family's life, your whole generations to come's life, your society, your community, whatever. And you're going to start to see that if you don't allow schooling to get in the way of education, you're going to get a wonderful result. My name is Michael Rearden. I'm a mindset coach. If you have any questions, email me coachinginsession@gmail.com. And I'll see everyone at the next episode of Coaching in Session. Until then, everyone take care.